The late September sun cast long shadows across Maple Street in Woodvale, where perfectly trimmed lawns and white picket fences created a scene from a Norman Rockwell painting. Children's laughter echoed from Riverside Park, mixing with the gentle rustling of golden leaves that had just begun their autumn dance. Margaret Wheeler adjusted baby Lily's sunbonnet as they sat on their new front porch. At 8 months old, Lily was all rosy cheeks and curious eyes, taking in everything about their new neighborhood with silent wonder. Thomas, still in his weekend painting clothes, was tinkering with the porch swing, their latest attempt to make this strange house feel more like home. "The Hendersons invited us to their barbecue next weekend," Margaret mentioned, watching Mrs. Peterson walk past with her twins in their double stroller. "Apparently the whole neighborhood shows up." Thomas grunted from behind the swing. "Might be good to finally meet everyone. We've been here 3 weeks, and I still can't keep track of who lives where." A cool breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass and somebody's apple pie. Lily squealed with delight, reaching toward something across the street. Margaret followed her daughter's gaze and noticed a dog watching them from the shadow of old Mr. Franklin's oak tree. It wasn't like the other dogs in the neighborhood, the purebreds and designer breeds that paraded past their house each morning. This one was different. A medium-sized mutt with intelligent eyes and a scruffy coat that suggested a life lived rough. Despite its apparent status as a stray, there was something dignified about the way it held itself, almost like a soldier standing at ease. The dog tilted its head, studying Lily with an intensity that made Margaret slightly uneasy. Yet there was nothing threatening in its posture. If anything, it seemed curious, almost protective. "Thomas," Margaret called softly, "look at that dog across the street." Thomas peered around the swing. "Probably another stray. Animal control mentioned they've had a few lately, with that construction project pushing them out of the old Wilson property." But this didn't feel like just another stray. The dog's eyes remained fixed on Lily, who was now bouncing excitedly in Margaret's lap. When a car drove past, momentarily blocking their view, Margaret expected the dog to disappear, but it simply shifted position, maintaining its gentle vigil. "It's kind of sweet," Margaret mused, "the way it's watching her." Thomas finally got the swing properly attached. "Just keep an eye out. You never know with strays." As if hearing this slight against its character, the dog stood up straighter. A shaft of sunlight broke through the branches above, illuminating its fur in a way that revealed old scars and what might have been a darker story behind those knowing eyes. Lily reached out again, making the grabbing motion that indicated she wanted something. The dog's tail wagged once, almost imperceptibly, before it melted back into the shadows of the oak tree, leaving Margaret with the strange feeling that this wouldn't be their last encounter. The next morning dawned crisp and bright, perfect for Margaret's plan to explore more of the neighborhood with Lily. She tucked a blanket around her daughter in the navy blue stroller, a baby shower gift from her sister, and set off toward the local coffee shop she'd spotted during their move-in. "Time for Mommy to finally get a decent latte," she told Lily, who was contentedly chewing on her favorite teething ring. The morning routine of other families played out around them. Cars backing out of driveways, children waiting for school buses, and the ever-present parade of dog walkers. "Oh, you must be the new family on Maple," called a woman walking a pristinely groomed golden retriever. "I'm Beth Cooper from Cedar Lane, and this gentleman here is Winston." The retriever sat perfectly, exactly what you'd expect from a dog in Woodvale. "Margaret Wheeler," she replied, pausing to chat. "And this is Lily." "Have you seen it yet?" Beth asked, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "The stray that's been hanging around?" Margaret's mind went to the dog from yesterday. "Actually, yes. It was watching us from across the street." "Nobody knows where it came from," Beth continued. "Animal control's been trying to catch it for weeks, but it's too clever. Smart thing, though. Never aggressive. Just watching." As if summoned by their conversation, movement caught Margaret's eye. There it was again, the same dog from yesterday, half hidden behind a row of hydrangeas. In the morning light, she could see its coat better, a mix of brown and gray with distinctive white markings on its chest. Lily spotted it too, letting out a delighted squeal that made Winston's ears perk up. The stray took a tentative step forward, its eyes fixed on Lily with that same intense focus from yesterday. "See what I mean?" Beth whispered. "It's fascinated by children. Mrs. Henderson swears it guided her grandson away from a broken piece of sidewalk last week." The dog moved closer, each step careful and deliberate. Winston watched but showed no sign of aggression, unusual for him, according to Beth's surprised expression. Lily dropped her teething ring, and before Margaret could react, the stray darted forward with surprising grace. It gently picked up the toy, and instead of running away with it, placed it carefully back in Lily's lap. The baby giggled, reaching out to touch the dog's nose. Margaret's heart jumped, but something in the dog's gentle demeanor kept her from snatching Lily back. The dog's eyes met hers for a moment, conveying something almost like reassurance. A jogger ran past, music blaring from his headphones. The sudden noise made the dog step back, positioning itself subtly between the stroller and the potential threat. After the jogger passed, it gave Lily one last look before disappearing behind the hydrangeas. "Well," Beth breathed, "I've never seen it come that close to anyone before. Your daughter must be special." Margaret stared at the spot where the dog had vanished, wondering why she felt more intrigued than afraid. "Yes," she murmured, "something special indeed." That weekend, Thomas suggested they explore Riverside Park as a family. "We should get to know our new neighborhood properly," he said, packing a small picnic while Margaret dressed Lily in her favorite yellow sundress. The park was bustling with weekend activity, children on the playground, elderly couples on benches, and the sound of a local band setting up for an afternoon performance. Thomas found them a perfect spot under a maple tree, spreading out their checkered blanket while Margaret settled Lily into her portable playpen. "This is more like it," Thomas smiled, watching their daughter happily play with her blocks. "A proper family outing!" Margaret was about to agree when she noticed a familiar shape at the edge of her vision. The stray dog had appeared again, lying in the shade about 30 feet away, its eyes fixed on their location. She nudged Thomas. "Look who's here!" "That's the dog you mentioned?" Thomas studied it with professional curiosity. As a former EMT, he had a knack for reading body language, human or animal. "Interesting. See how it's positioned? Almost like it's..." He trailed off, distracted by the band starting their first song. The music drew more people to their section of the park. A group of teenagers set up a makeshift bicycle course nearby, practicing jumps and tricks. Margaret watched them nervously, but they seemed to be keeping a safe distance. Suddenly, a car backfired on the street behind them, a sharp, explosive sound that echoed across the park. One of the teenage cyclists, startled by the noise, lost control while mid-jump. His bike veered sharply toward their picnic blanket, headed straight for Lily's playpen. Everything happened in a blur. Margaret screamed. Thomas lunged forward but was too far away. The cyclist tried desperately to redirect his path, but the dog was already moving. In a flash of brown and gray fur, it shot across the grass like a missile. The dog slammed its body into the bike's back wheel, knocking it sideways. The cyclist tumbled safely onto the grass, his bike clattering harmlessly past the playpen. The stray had positioned itself perfectly, taking the impact while ensuring the bike would miss Lily by inches. A crowd quickly gathered. The teenager was shaken but unhurt, repeatedly apologizing. Thomas checked Lily, who, remarkably, seemed more fascinated than frightened by the whole incident. The dog stood nearby, favoring its left side slightly where the bike had struck, but its eyes never left Lily. People were pointing, phones out, already sharing the story of the heroic stray. "That was incredible," Thomas breathed, his EMT training kicking in as he approached the dog slowly. "Let me check you out, buddy. That was quite a hit you took." But the dog backed away, still watching Lily. Despite obvious pain, its stance remained protective, alert. "It knew," Margaret whispered, holding Lily close. "Somehow it knew the bike was going to hit her. Thomas, this isn't just any stray." The dog finally relaxed its stance, seemingly satisfied that Lily was safe. With one last look at the baby, it limped away into the gathering crowd, leaving behind a park full of amazed witnesses and one very grateful family. By Monday morning, the park incident had taken on a life of its own. Margaret's phone buzzed constantly with notifications from the Woodvale community Facebook page, where a shaky video of the dog's heroic intervention had gone viral among local residents. "Did you see Mrs. Peterson's post?" Thomas asked over breakfast, scrolling through his phone. "She says the dog responded to basic commands when she tried talking to it last week. Sit, stay, like it had proper training." Lily babbled in her high chair, happily spreading pureed carrots across her tray while Margaret read through the growing number of comments. "Listen to this one," she said. "My brother's a K9 trainer for the police department. Looking at that video, the way the dog calculated its trajectory, that's not just instinct. That's specialized training." Another post caught her eye. "The stray's been here for exactly 3 weeks, right after the Memorial Hospital closed their therapy dog program. Coincidence?" Thomas set his phone down, his EMT experience adding weight to his next words. "You know, I watched it yesterday, the way it moved, how it protected her without causing more harm. It reminded me of the service dogs we worked with in the emergency department." A knock at their door interrupted their speculation. It was Beth Cooper, still in her morning jogging outfit, looking excited. "You'll never believe this," she burst out. "I just got off the phone with animal control. They have no record of picking up any dogs matching our hero's description. But," she paused dramatically, "they did get a strange call 3 weeks ago about a dog jumping the fence at Memorial Hospital during their closure procedures." Margaret frowned. "The therapy dog program?" "Exactly. But here's the weird part. When they went to check, they found no signs of any dogs. The program's records had already been moved or sealed. Dead end." Thomas rubbed his chin thoughtfully. A therapy dog would explain its gentleness with Lily. But why would it run away from a program? And why focus so much on our daughter? As if on cue, they heard a familiar squeal from Lily. Through the kitchen window, they could see the dog sitting in their neighbor's yard, watching their house with that same steady gaze. "I'm calling the hospital," Margaret decided. "Maybe someone there remembers something about their therapy dogs." "Already tried," Beth sighed. "Administrative mess with the closure. All their records are locked up in some corporate archive." Thomas stood up, his emergency response instincts kicking in. "We need to make sure that dog's okay after yesterday's hit. It was limping." But when they looked again, the dog had vanished, leaving only paw prints in the morning dew. Margaret stared at the empty yard, thinking about all the coincidences. The hospital's closure, the dog's apparent training, its fixation on Lily. Every answer seemed to lead to more questions. "Whatever its story is," she said finally, "that dog saved our daughter. We need to help it before something happens to it or before it disappears for good." After breakfast, Margaret placed a bowl of water and some leftover roast chicken on their back porch. She settled into a deck chair with Lily, hoping to coax their mysterious guardian out of hiding. "Come on, sweetie," she whispered to the shadows of their backyard. "You must be hungry after yesterday." Thomas watched from the kitchen window while making work calls, his face a mixture of concern and curiosity. A slight movement near their flower bed caught Margaret's attention, 2 gentle eyes reflecting the morning light. "There you are," she said softly. "It's okay. We just want to help." The dog emerged slowly, its movements still showing signs of yesterday's injury. Despite obvious hunger, it approached cautiously, stopping every few feet to study them. Lily reached out from Margaret's lap, making happy gurgling sounds. Something in the baby's innocent welcome seemed to decide it. The dog came closer, accepting their presence, before carefully eating the offered food. Margaret could now see its injuries weren't severe, mainly bruising from the impact with the bicycle. "Good boy," she ventured, though she wasn't sure of its gender. The dog's ears twitched at her voice but kept eating. When Lily dropped her rattle, the dog immediately retrieved it, placing it gently in the baby's lap before returning to its meal. "Thomas," Margaret called quietly, "look how it checks the perimeter after helping her. That's not normal stray behavior, is it?" Her husband came outside, keeping his movements slow. "No, it's not. That's security training. See how it positions itself? Always maintaining sight lines to all access points while staying within reach of Lily." The dog finished eating and sat down, regarding them with that unnervingly intelligent gaze. When Thomas carefully approached to check its injuries, it allowed a brief examination before moving just out of reach. "Want to come inside?" Margaret asked, standing slowly with Lily. "We have a warm spot by the fireplace." To their surprise, the dog followed them to the door but hesitated at the threshold. It peered inside, nose working rapidly, almost as if searching for something, or remembering something. "What is it, boy?" Thomas asked. "What are you looking for?" The dog's attention fixed on their family photos, particularly ones showing Lily as a newborn. A small whine escaped its throat, the first vocal sound they'd heard it make. "Margaret," Thomas said quietly, "look at how it's reacting to the baby pictures, almost like it recognizes them," she finished, "or what they represent." Their mysterious visitor finally entered, moving directly to Lily's play area. It circled once, sniffing each toy, before settling into a perfect guard position, eyes on both the baby and the room's entrances. "Well," Thomas sighed, "I guess we have a house guest." Margaret watched as Lily happily played with her blocks under the dog's watchful gaze. "Something tells me this is exactly where it wants to be." The following morning, Margaret called the local veterinary clinic. After explaining their situation to a sympathetic receptionist, she secured an appointment for that afternoon. "Let's see what we can learn about you," she told the dog, who had spent the night faithfully guarding Lily's nursery door. Getting it into the car proved surprisingly easy, as if it understood the purpose of their journey. Dr. Sarah Chen's office was warm and welcoming, with walls covered in photos of happy pets and their owners. The dog remained calm during check-in, though its eyes never left Lily and her carrier. "So this is our local hero," Dr. Chen smiled, entering the exam room. "I saw the video, quite impressive." She approached slowly, allowing the dog to sniff her hand. "Let's see what stories your body can tell us." The examination revealed more than they expected. Despite living as a stray, the dog was relatively healthy and well-muscled. Dr. Chen found evidence of quality nutrition from its earlier life. Strong teeth, good bone structure. "Here's something interesting," she said, gently turning back the dog's ear. "See this marking? It's a tattoo, very faded, but it's there. This type of identification was once used by specialized breeding programs and service dog organizations." Margaret leaned closer. "Can you tell which organization?" "The numbers are too faded, but..." Dr. Chen's voice trailed off as she found something else. "These scars, they're surgical, professional work. Someone invested a lot in this dog's medical care." She took samples for basic health screening and checked for a microchip. "I'll run these numbers through the National Registry. Sometimes we get lucky." The dog remained stoic throughout the examination, only moving when Lily made the slightest sound of distress. Even then, its response was measured, a gentle check rather than anxious hovering. "One more thing," Dr. Chen said, reviewing her notes. "Based on the surgical scars and muscle development, I'd say this dog had extensive training. The way it moves, maintains awareness. This isn't just any service animal. This dog was specially trained for something specific." "But what?" Margaret asked, watching the dog gently nose Lily's carrier. "That's the mystery, isn't it?" Dr. Chen began typing on her computer. "I'll make some calls to the service dog community. A dog with this level of training, someone must be looking for it." As they left the clinic, Margaret felt both hopeful and uneasy. Learning more about their mysterious guardian was important, but what if someone did come looking for it? After all they'd witnessed, could they just hand it over? The dog jumped easily into their car, settling into its now familiar position where it could watch both Lily and their surroundings. Whatever its past held, one thing was clear: This dog had found a new purpose in their baby girl. Saturday arrived with the promise of Woodvale's annual neighborhood barbecue. The Wheelers' backyard buzzed with activity as neighbors gathered, bringing dishes and stories to share. The mysterious dog had become a local celebrity, accepting gentle pats while maintaining its vigilant watch over Lily. "Amazing how it never leaves her side," Beth Cooper commented, watching the dog follow Margaret as she carried Lily between groups of guests. "It's like having a furry guardian angel." Thomas manned the grill, occasionally sneaking choice bits of hamburger to their protective companion. The afternoon sun warmed the gathering, and conversation flowed easily among neighbors, sharing their own theories about the dog's origins. Then it happened, a moment of chaos that would cement the dog's place in their lives forever. Margaret had set Lily in her playpen while helping arrange desserts on the patio table. The autumn breeze picked up, sending napkins flying. As neighbors scrambled to catch the wayward paper goods, no one noticed Lily, now mobile and curious, crawling through a gap in her playpen's gate. No one except the dog. Its head snapped up, tracking Lily's movement toward the old oak tree at the yard's edge. The massive tree had been flagged for removal, its branches weakened by recent storms. As Lily reached for a colorful leaf, a sharp crack split the air. The dog was moving before anyone realized what was happening. It bolted across the yard with incredible speed, just as a massive branch gave way above Lily's head. "Lily!" Margaret's scream pierced the afternoon quiet, but the dog was already there. It slammed into Lily, pushing her clear of danger while taking the full impact of the falling branch across its side. The crack of wood meeting flesh made everyone flinch. Chaos erupted. Thomas sprinted to Lily, finding her completely unharmed but crying from the shock. The dog lay pinned under the branch, breathing heavily but still trying to keep eyes on the baby. "Call 911!" someone shouted, though it wasn't clear if they meant for Lily or the dog. Neighbors rushed to lift the branch while Thomas checked the dog's injuries. Its fur was matted with blood, but incredibly, it was already trying to stand. "Easy, boy," Thomas soothed, his EMT training taking over. "Let me check you out first." The dog whimpered, the first sound of pain they'd ever heard it make. But its eyes remained fixed on Lily, who was now safely in Margaret's arms. As sirens wailed in the distance, Margaret felt tears streaming down her face. This brave creature had once again put itself between her baby and disaster. This time, though, the price had been much higher. The question was no longer whether the dog would stay with them, but whether it would survive to continue its self-appointed mission of protection. Monday morning dawned with Margaret sitting anxiously in the veterinary hospital's waiting room. After 2 days of intensive care, Dr. Chen had promised an update on their heroic dog's condition. Lily fussed in her carrier, missing her furry protector. "Mrs. Wheeler?" The receptionist caught her attention. "There's someone here asking about your dog, Mr. James Carter." Margaret turned to see a man in his mid-30s, wearing a wrinkled dress shirt and carrying a worn leather briefcase. His eyes were red-rimmed, as if he hadn't slept. "I saw the news report," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "About the dog saving the baby from the falling branch. I've been searching for this dog for months." Margaret instinctively pulled Lily's carrier closer. "You're the owner?" "Not exactly." He pulled out his phone, showing her a photo. "This was my father's therapy dog. Dad worked with traumatized infants at Memorial Hospital before he passed away. The dog, it disappeared the day after his funeral." The photo showed a younger version of their dog wearing a therapy service vest, sitting beside an elderly man in scrubs. They were in what looked like a hospital nursery. "His name is Guardian," James continued. "Dad trained him specially for the infant ward. He had this incredible ability to sense when babies were in distress, even before the monitors picked it up." Dr. Chen emerged from the treatment area, catching the end of the conversation. "That explains a lot," she said, "especially his focused behavior around Lily. These dogs are trained to be hyper-vigilant about infant safety." "Is he going to be okay?" Margaret asked, looking between them. "He's tough," Dr. Chen smiled. "The branch caused significant bruising and a couple of cracked ribs, but he's already trying to get up. Classic guardian behavior, according to his records. James ran a hand through his hair. That's why Dad named him Guardian. Said he'd never seen a dog so naturally protective of babies. He turned to Margaret, his expression pained. I know he's become important to your family, but legally, he's still registered to my father's estate. Margaret felt her heart sink. After everything the Guardian had done for Lily, the thought of losing him was unbearable. But before she could speak, they heard a commotion from the treatment area, the distinct sound of claws on tile, followed by concerned voices. Guardian appeared in the doorway, dragging his IV line, focused entirely on reaching Lily. Despite his injuries, his tail wagged at the sight of her. James watched the reunion, tears forming in his eyes. Dad always said, a therapy dog chooses its mission, he whispered. Looks like the Guardian has chosen him. The question of ownership hung heavy in the air, complicated by legal rights, emotional bonds, and one dog's unwavering dedication to a baby he had chosen to protect. Back home that evening, James spread a collection of old documents across the Wheelers' dining room table. Guardian lay nearby on his prescribed bed rest, still keeping Lily in his sightline despite Dr. Chen's orders to remain still. These are Dad's training logs, James explained, carefully opening a leather-bound journal. He documented everything about Guardian's development. Margaret leaned forward, reading the neat handwriting. Day 147. Guardian demonstrated extraordinary precognitive response to infant distress. Detected Sarah Miller's seizure 30 seconds before hospital monitors. Unprecedented behavior. Dad worked with at-risk newborns for 40 years, James continued. He always said some dogs had a sixth sense about babies, but Guardian was different. Watch this. He pulled up a video on his tablet. The footage showed Guardian in the NICU, suddenly alert and pawing at an incubator. Moments later, the baby inside showed signs of respiratory distress. The nurses responded instantly to Guardian's warning. He saved 16 babies that year alone, James said quietly. Dad called him his miracle worker. Thomas studied another document, a newspaper clipping from 3 years ago. The headline read, Hospital Therapy Dog Leads Rescuers to Trapped Mother and Newborn During Flood. I remember this, Thomas said. The mother got stranded in her car. The rescue teams couldn't find them in the storm. Guardian tracked them by the baby's scent, James nodded. Stayed with them for 6 hours until help arrived. After that, Dad said he'd never seen a dog so committed to protecting infants. Margaret watched Guardian gently nose Lily's sock that had fallen nearby. But why did he run away? If he was so successful at the hospital? James's face fell. Dad's death hit him hard. They were inseparable. The day after the funeral, Guardian visited the now empty hospital nursery one last time and just disappeared, like he was looking for a new purpose. And he found Lily, Margaret whispered, understanding dawning in her eyes. All the pieces were falling into place. Guardian's appearance right after they moved in, his constant vigilance, his incredible saves. Dad would have loved this, James smiled sadly, watching Guardian with Lily. His beloved Guardian, still protecting babies, still saving lives. The room fell quiet as they absorbed the weight of Guardian's history and the responsibility of his chosen mission. A mission that had led him, against all odds, to a baby who needed a guardian angel of her own. Dark clouds gathered over Woodvale as Margaret watched the local weather report with growing concern. Severe storm warning for the entire county, the meteorologist announced. Potential for flash flooding in low-lying areas. Guardian, still recovering from his injuries, paced between the windows and Lily's playpen despite doctor's orders to rest. His agitation was noticeable, ears perked, nose working overtime, eyes constantly checking the darkening sky. He knows something's coming, James observed from the couch. He'd stayed in town, helping piece together more of Guardian's history while navigating the complicated question of ownership. Dad's journals mentioned his incredible weather sensitivity, especially when it might affect infants. Thunder rumbled in the distance, making Lily whimper. Guardian immediately limped to her side, offering silent comfort despite his own discomfort. The storm track looks eerily similar to the flood 3 years ago, Thomas noted, studying his phone. The one where the Guardian found that stranded mother and baby. A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. Beth Cooper stood on their porch, looking worried. "Emergency council meeting," she announced. "The river's rising faster than expected. They're considering evacuations for the east side of town." Margaret glanced at Guardian, who had positioned himself between Lily and the nearest window. His behavior was becoming more anxious by the minute. "I need to check the hospital's emergency protocols," Thomas said, grabbing his EMT gear. "They'll need all hands if this gets bad." James pulled out his father's last journal, flipping through weather-stained pages. "Look at this! Dad documented Guardian's behavior before major storms. The more agitated he gets, the worse the weather turns out to be." Outside, the wind picked up, sending trash cans rolling down the street. The Guardian let out a low whine, a sound they'd never heard from him before. "Margaret," James said quietly, "I know we haven't settled his legal status yet, but I think we need to trust Guardian's instincts right now. Dad always said he had a sixth sense about danger to infants." Lightning flashed, illuminating Guardian's intense expression. He was no longer pacing, but standing rigid, eyes fixed on the window facing the river. Margaret's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. "Flash flood warning. Immediate evacuation recommended for Riverside areas. Seek higher ground immediately." "We should pack some essentials," she decided, watching Guardian's increasing distress. Better safe than sorry. As they gathered supplies, Guardian's behavior grew more insistent. He kept moving between Lily and the front door, clearly trying to tell them something. "Dad wrote about this too," James said, reading from the journal. "Before the big flood, the Guardian tried to evacuate the NICU before anyone knew how bad it would get. He saved 43 babies that night." Thunder cracked directly overhead, making the windows rattle. Guardian barked, the first time they'd ever heard him do so, and gently but firmly tugged at Lily's blanket with his teeth. The message was clear. They needed to leave. Now. What nobody realized was that the Guardian's warnings were about to prove more crucial than any of them could imagine. The storm hit Woodvale with unprecedented fury. Rain hammered against the Wheelers' windows as they finished packing essential supplies. Guardian refused to let Lily out of his sight, his anxiety growing with each thunderclap. "The river breached its banks near Parker Street," Thomas reported, hanging up his phone. "Emergency services are overwhelmed. They're calling in support from neighboring counties." Margaret secured Lily in her car seat, while James loaded their emergency bags. Guardian paced between them, checking every movement, every decision. His previous injury seemed forgotten in the face of this new threat. "We should head to the high school," Beth called from her car next door. "They're setting up an emergency shelter." Her voice was cut off by a deafening crack of thunder. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging the neighborhood into darkness broken only by lightning flashes. In that moment of chaos, Guardian's head snapped toward the river, his entire body tensing. "Let's move," Thomas urged, helping Margaret with the last bag. But as they headed for their car, Guardian began barking frantically, not at them, but at the line of cars already forming on their street. "What is it, boy?" James asked, recognizing the warning signs his father had documented. "What do you see?" The answer came with the next lightning flash. A wall of water was surging down Cedar Lane, cutting off their planned escape route. Cars ahead of them began reversing in panic, creating gridlock. "The river must have completely overflowed," Thomas shouted over the storm. "We're cut off!" Guardian suddenly lunged forward, tugging at Margaret's sleeve, trying to guide them in the opposite direction from their cars. "He wants us to go another way," James realized, remembering his father's journals. "Guardian found alternate routes during the last flood. He knows the high ground." "But our cars," Margaret started. "No time," Thomas interrupted, seeing the water rising rapidly around them. "We trust the Guardian. Now." With Lily secured in her carrier, they followed Guardian through the darkness. The dog moved with purpose, leading them away from the flooding streets and through a narrow passage between houses. Despite his injury, he continuously checked their progress. waiting when needed, urging them on when time was critical. They could hear sirens in the distance, mixing with the sound of helicopter rotors. The storm's intensity increased, but Guardian never hesitated. He led them up gradually rising terrain, away from the river's fury. "Look," James pointed through the rain. "He's taking us to Hillcrest Park. It's the highest point in town." Other evacuees began following them, recognizing that Guardian seemed to know the safest path. The dog paused occasionally, ensuring no one was left behind, before pressing on with his precious cargo, a baby he'd sworn to protect. As they climbed higher, they could see the devastation below. Streets they'd planned to use were now raging rivers. Their original evacuation route had become a lake of churning debris. The Guardian had saved them again. But the night was far from over. From the relative safety of Hillcrest Park, they watched as emergency vehicles' flashing lights reflected off the floodwaters below. Guardian remained vigilant, his attention divided between Lily and the chaos unfolding in the valley. Suddenly, a woman's scream cut through the storm's roar. "My baby! Someone help! My baby!" Through the rain, they spotted a young mother struggling up the hill. Her arms were empty, her face twisted in panic. "The stroller! It slipped away! The water took my baby!" Before anyone could react, Guardian was moving. Despite his injuries, he bolted down the hill with incredible speed, following a path only he could see through the darkness. "Guardian, wait!" James shouted. But the dog was already gone, disappearing into the storm. Thomas immediately switched to EMT mode. "Which way did the stroller go?" he asked the hysterical mother. "The old bridge, near Wilson Street. The current. It was so strong." Margaret handed Lily to James and grabbed Thomas's arm. "We have to help him!" "Stay with Lily," Thomas ordered, already pulling out his flashlight. "I'll follow Guardian." The next 20 minutes were agony. The storm raged on as rescue workers and volunteers coordinated search efforts. Margaret held the distraught mother while James kept Lily safe, all of them straining to see through the darkness. Then came a bark, distant but distinct. "Over there!" someone shouted, pointing their flashlight toward the old bridge. Guardian had somehow made his way to a partially submerged gazebo where the stroller had become wedged. The baby, still strapped in, was suspended just above the rising water. But reaching them would be nearly impossible. The current was too strong for boats, and the gazebo's structure was failing. They watched in horror as Guardian calculated his next move. The dog tested different approaches, fighting against his injuries in the current, searching for a path. "He can't make it alone?" Thomas said, already rigging a rescue line. "The current's too strong!" But the Guardian had already made his decision. With methodical precision, he slipped into the water upstream of the gazebo, using the current to carry him to the structure. His injured body slammed against the wood, but he held on, pulling himself up to the crying baby. Using techniques perfected in years of service, Guardian managed to get his teeth carefully around the stroller's safety harness. Then, with incredible strength, he began maneuvering the stroller toward higher ground, inch by precious inch. Rescue workers rushed to meet them, forming a human chain. The moment Guardian got the stroller within reach, they pulled both baby and dog to safety. The baby was cold but unharmed, still securely strapped in. Guardian, soaking and exhausted, immediately checked the infant before collapsing, his injuries finally catching up with him. As paramedics examined both baby and dog, the gathered crowd burst into applause. Guardian had done the impossible again, proving that his extraordinary gift for saving infants transcended even his own physical limitations. But this time, the cost of heroism might have been too high. The veterinary emergency room buzzed with quiet tension as Guardian underwent treatment for his aggravated injuries and exposure. Margaret, Thomas, and James waited anxiously, while Lily slept peacefully in her carrier, unaware of the drama surrounding her protector. Dr. Chen emerged from the treatment area, her surgical scrub showing signs of a long procedure. "Guardian stable," she announced, bringing collective sighs of relief. He tore some healing tissue and developed mild hypothermia, but his will to live is remarkable. Just like his will to save that baby, Thomas added softly. The mother of the rescued infant, Sarah Mitchell, entered the waiting room, her own baby now warm and safe in her arms. Tears streamed down her face as she approached them. "The police told me everything," she said, her voice trembling. "About Guardian's history with babies, his special training, how he saved so many." She looked down at her sleeping daughter. "And now mine too." James pulled out his father's final journal entry, written just days before his death. His hands shook slightly as he read aloud. Guardian's gift isn't just his training, it's his heart. He understands that every baby is precious, irreplaceable. I pray that when I'm gone, he finds a place where his gift is needed most. Dr. Chen motioned them toward Guardian's recovery room. The dog lay on a padded bed, attached to monitoring equipment, but his tail wagged weakly at their approach. His eyes immediately found Lily, checking that she was safe. "Your father would be proud," Margaret told James, watching Guardian's devoted behavior even in his weakened state. "His guardian is still fulfilling his mission." James nodded, wiping his eyes. "I came here thinking I needed to reclaim him, to preserve Dad's legacy. But watching him these past few days, with Lily, with the flood, with Sarah's baby, I understand now. This is exactly where Dad would want him to be." He pulled out a folder of legal documents. "I had these drawn up yesterday. Full adoption papers, transferring Guardian's ownership to your family." He handed them to Margaret. "Dad believed every baby deserved a guardian angel. Lily found hers." Sarah stepped forward, her baby cooing softly. "The police chief said they're going to recommend Guardian for the National Animal Hero Award, but that doesn't seem enough for saving my daughter's life." Guardian's eyes moved between the two babies, his expression peaceful despite his pain. Even now he was watching over them, fulfilling his lifelong mission to protect the most vulnerable. "You know," Dr. Chen observed, checking Guardian's vitals, "in all my years of veterinary medicine, I've never seen anything quite like him. His medical scans show healed injuries from previous rescues, each one a badge of honor from saving another life." Margaret reached out to gently stroke Guardian's fur. "He's not just a hero," she said softly. "He's a guardian angel with 4 paws and a heart bigger than we could ever imagine." Guardian sighed contentedly, finally allowing himself to rest, knowing his charges were safe and his purpose fulfilled. 3 weeks after the flood, Woodvale's rebuilt park filled with people gathering for a special ceremony. Guardian, fully recovered and wearing a new service vest, sat proudly beside Lily's stroller, his posture perfect despite the excitement around him. The morning sun glinted off his freshly groomed coat, the gray and brown fur now restored to its former glory. Mayor Thompson, no relation to Margaret, stood at a makeshift podium holding a special medallion created by the town's artisans. "Today, we honor not just a dog, but a testament to unwavering dedication," she announced. Guardian's actions during the flood saved not only baby Sarah, but led dozens of others to safety through his knowledge of high-ground routes. The crowd included many familiar faces. Beth Cooper dabbing tears with a tissue, Dr. Chen beaming proudly at her recovered patient, and Sarah Mitchell holding her baby girl, who wore a tiny shirt reading "Protected by Guardian." Even the teenagers who had once practiced bike tricks in the park stood respectfully, their phones ready to capture the moment. James sat with the Wheelers, his father's journals now formally donated to the town's historical society. The local newspaper had run a feature story about Guardian's history, inspiring other hospitals to reinstate their therapy dog programs. 3 other towns had already reached out about starting similar initiatives. "Guardian," the mayor called out formally. The dog stood, giving Lily one quick check before approaching the podium with military precision, his steps measured and dignified. "For extraordinary heroism, unwavering dedication to protecting the children of Woodvale, and for showing us all what true courage looks like, we present you with the key to the city." As the medallion was gently placed around his neck, Guardian maintained his dignified bearing, though his tail wagged slightly when Lily squealed in delight from her stroller. The sunlight caught the engraved surface, making it sparkle like his watchful eyes. The ceremony concluded with another surprise. Beth Cooper unveiled a bronze statue to be installed in the park, guardian watching over a sleeping infant, with the inscription, "Every child's guardian angel," beneath it. The sculptor had captured every detail, from his alert ears to his protective stance. "The statue will remind future generations," the mayor explained, "that sometimes angels come with fur and 4 paws, and that true heroism knows no bounds." After the ceremony, as families mingled and children carefully petted the guest of honor, Margaret watched Guardian return to his favorite spot beside Lily. Despite all the attention, despite the medallion and the ceremony, he remained focused on his chosen mission. A light breeze ruffled his fur as he scanned the horizon, ever vigilant. "You know," Thomas said, joining her with ice cream cones, "I think this is exactly what your father wanted, James. Guardian isn't just protecting one baby anymore. He's inspired an entire community to look out for its children." James nodded, watching as Guardian gently redirected a toddler who had wandered too close to the pond. "Dad used to say that every life Guardian saved created ripples we'd never fully see. Look at those ripples now." The afternoon continued with families sharing stories of Guardian's impact on their lives. Children drew pictures of their furry hero, while parents discussed starting a fund for training more therapy dogs. Through it all, Guardian remained at his post, watching over not just Lily now, but all the children of Woodvale. As the sun set over the park, casting long shadows across families heading home, Guardian remained alert but content. He had found his new purpose, his new family, and his perfect charge in baby Lily. The medallion around his neck caught the fading light, but it was the love in his eyes, watching over his chosen baby, that truly shone. Some called it a miracle, how a grieving therapy dog found exactly the family who needed him most. Others said it was destiny, but for Guardian it was simply his calling, being the watchful protector, the silent guardian, the furry angel that every baby deserves.